Hello, I'm Alastair McLellan, the editor of HSJ. Welcome to our video of our session on STPs at NHS Expo. We're first going to hear from Amanda Doyle, Chief Clinical Officer of Blackpool CCG, who's head of the Cumbria and Lancashire STP. Next, David Pearson, the Director of Adult Social Services from Nottinghamshire County Council, who leads the Nottinghamshire STP. And then finally from Matthew Swindells, the Operations Director of NHS England. We're going to hear from Amanda and David about the local experience of putting together an STP, what they're aiming to achieve and the various challenges that they face in doing so, which I'm going to ask them to do in as briefly a fashion as possible. Then I'm going to ask Matthew to give us an overview of a very brief overview of the STP process. Perhaps Matthew focusing on what happens next in terms of perhaps approval process and publication process, etc. I might well have a couple of follow-up questions after we've heard from our three speakers, but I want to try and devote the most of our time to you being able to ask questions. We are filming this session for and we're going to put that up on the HSJ website in a few weeks' time. So be aware that you may well be on telly or on the HSJ website anyway, should you want to contribute. Amanda.
Thank you. So my STP patch, Lancashire and South Cumbria, our plan is to tackle three things in brief. We have appalling health outcomes. We have some of the worst health and the shortest life expectancy of anywhere in the country within Lancashire and South Cumbria. When people do get sick, the outcomes of their health care is in many cases not as good as it could be if we delivered that health care differently. So for some things, we're not doing the best we can with the resources we've got because of the way in which we configure and deliver care. And then the third thing is we are not financially sustainable. Whether we like it or not, we cannot continue to deliver care across Lancashire and South Cumbria the way we do now. It's just not affordable. And so we have to tackle all of those things. There's been a lot of focus and a lot of talk on the finance, and people seem to have the impression that that's what it's all about. It's not for us. The number one overriding priority for us is to get the health of our population up to something like approaching that in other comparable parts of the country. We've put quite a lot of effort into getting our governance right. I think we've probably got there. It's taken an inordinate amount of time, but it's really, really important for the simple reason that some of the decisions we're going to have to make are going to be difficult. We're going to have to make some pretty significant changes to the things we do and the way we do them. Those decisions will be difficult enough if you've not got your governance in place, if you haven't got the right people around the table, if you haven't agreed in advance how you're going to make those decisions, then it's going to be very, very difficult to do it. We've put quite a lot of effort into making sure the right people are around the table, and that has very much included local authorities, commissioners, providers, Health Watch, general practitioners, LMCs. So actually we have a huge programme board with what feels sometimes like a cast of thousands. Difficult to manage, but better than the alternative, which is not including people. One of the things we've done that I think will pay off 1,000-fold over the next year or two is our local authorities. So we have 3 upper-tier local authorities in Lancashire and 1 in Cumbria. The 3 in Lancashire have now agreed proposals to delegate into a single health and wellbeing board that covers the STP patch and mirror that with a single scrutiny arrangement for the STP patch. That will make it much easier for us to carry out some of our functions and to make sure that we've got a proper health and wellbeing board overview. Probably very briefly worth mentioning the money. There's a lot of talk about transformation, about your finances in 4 or 5 years' time about the changes we need to make ourselves financially sustainable in the longer term. The biggest challenge we've probably got is the sustainability bit of sustainability and transformation. So getting ourselves into a reasonable position by the end of this year and during 17-18 to enable us to have a safe base to start proper transformation from. So that sustainability bit is key and is proving a huge challenge. Communications and engagement. A lot of talk recently about these secret plans. These plans are not secret. We have involved the public via organisations like Health Watch so far, and that's simply because the pace of the programme, the timescales and the amount of time we're spending just in collecting the information upon which to base our plans has been huge. We're now moving into a solution design phase when we're actually going to be coming up with very concrete proposals and plans, and that's the point at which we are now starting to involve the public much more. We've already started involving and talking to local politicians, both local elected members of councils, but also our local MPs, using the local authorities and the setups they've got to do that very effectively. But we need to get the message out there. People need to understand there's nothing secret about this. It's just happening quite fast.
Thank you. David.
Okay, thank you very much. So Nottinghamshire, a population of 1.1 million, a £3.7 billion economy, which is the amount of money that's not only spent on Nottinghamshire residents, but those people from elsewhere who use services in Nottinghamshire because of things like specialised commissioning and tertiary services, with about over 40,000 people working in health and local government on this agenda. Our history is that this is the first time this particular footprint of Nottinghamshire has been used, because there are 6 CCGs, 6 district councils, 2 upper tier authorities, so quite a complex landscape working in this particular footprint for the first time. But also a history of innovation, because we have 5 vanguards, 2 integration pioneers, so a lot of fairly rich experience to draw upon in terms of applying our mind to this particular challenge. So in the first few months up to June the 30th, we set about working out what our vision was and what were the high impact changes as required. And we have focused on prevention and promoting independence. And in that regard, we've come up with a target to increase the healthy life expectancy of the people of Nottinghamshire by 3 years during the life of the plan, which we have worked out that we can just about do. And the reason for that is because it's a bit of a win-win, really. It actually improves the outcomes for people who are in the late 50s, early 60s in Nottinghamshire, which is the average age of people reaching non-healthy life expectancy. It also helps with the care and quality gap, and of course it also helps with the financial situation. Primary and community care services, so like everybody else, our intention is to reduce the reliance on hospital provision and residential and nursing homes from a social care point of view to do what people of Nottinghamshire want us to do, which is to care for more of them at home. And that requires a radical upshift in the level of primary and community care, including both health and social care. We also have a clear and pressing priority, just like everybody else, which is to make sure that the urgent and emergency care system is efficient and effective as it can be, because like everybody else we have current challenges. And fourthly, technology-enabled care, which is about sharing information records, and we have one of the best local digital roadmaps in the country. We're one of the 5 national exemplars as fed back after June the 30th, but also having an exponential growth in the use of assistive technology for care and treatment, as well as using it for the aims of prevention. So in terms of where we got to, I think we're grappling with a tiger, I think, is the way I describe it, in terms of getting this to where we need it to be, to have confidence that we can actually go out to the public and make sure that we've got this properly designed. The good news is that 33% of our propositions were already well explored and co-designed with the public through the vanguards. So we've got a rich history of actually not just engagement, but co-producing these things. So if I could just summarise quickly the challenges and the positives and the opportunities. First of all, making sure we've got enough capacity in the right place to make the changes. I have a history in local government of taking vast amounts of money out of local government, and I anticipate in most situations you need to invest at least 10% of the money that you want to get out. And if I tell you that the NHS gap is about 500 million and this local government gap is about another 133 million, all of which is in the public domain because it was on you and yours a week last Friday, so I can tell you that. So we have that kind of level of challenge. Being clear about what level of planning is required in order to make the next step. And that's an experience I have from local government in that we've saved half of our council budget in the last 6 years, not all of which has been a cash reduction, but and we're one of the better local authorities in the country for doing this. We didn't have every detail nailed down for year 5 in our first 5-year plan. As Don Berwick said on that You and Yours programme, this is necessarily an iterative process and you have to be good enough to make a start. I think the final challenge is one of culture. You've got to have, as organisations, be able to work to play for your club and your country. And also, we need to have a different paradigm in terms of the relationship between the citizens and our particular version of the state. And what I mean by that is the promoting independence and the self-care element of what we're trying to do is about making sure that we do just that. And I think we've got some fairly good schemes in relation to that. In terms of the positives, because we've got a lot of innovation, for every challenge we face in Nottinghamshire, we've got an example of where we have solved it. The challenge is to make sure that everybody adopts that best practice once. We have some stable leadership. We have some very high-performing organisations. And I think we have a degree of transparency in this process because I've done a total of 6 presentations to both the City and the County Health and Wellbeing Boards. And I suppose if, coming from local government, if I didn't get the local politics bit right, I probably ought to resign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amanda and David, you both talked a little bit about the challenges. I think you talked about the challenges in terms of the context of the environment in which you're having to work. What challenges, we're all amongst friends here, and Matthew is still new enough in post that he can blame most things on other people. So what are the particular challenges that you're having to face in dealing with the process that you're going through, the process that is being imposed upon you from the centre? What things are proving hardest? How are you tackling them? What might you like to ask Matthew for some more time, some more leeway, etc.? Just talk a little bit about that.
So, number one is capacity. Capacity to do the amount of work that's required to do this properly in the time available. We've got a programme director and we've freed up a full-time finance director and we've got a communications and engagement director full-time. This isn't my job, but it's rapidly becoming what I'm spending most of my time doing. And the rest of it
It's definitely your job, Amanda. I think you know it's your job.
It is. But what I mean is my days were full before we started this, and this takes a huge amount of time and energy to deliver. And so what we need above all is capacity. Because of the compressed arrangements for planning and contracting this year, the rest of the system is under more pressure than usual, and that's going to be really difficult over the autumn. Yeah. More people, more time, more capacity.
David?
So I totally agree with Amanda's comment, and I run over half the county council, and I'm the deputy chief executive, and I'm doing this 1 day a week. So that's. But But I also want to say that I actually believe in this, that it's the right thing to do. And that's why I agreed to do it, because I definitely don't have to do this, coming from local government. And I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. Whatever we think about the state of the economy and the level of funding for health and social care in this country, which I personally believe is not enough, our local responsibility is to get the best out of the public purse for our local population. And there is evidence that we aren't, and the outcomes aren't good enough. So I think that's the first thing I want to say. I think the second thing is going back to my point about being clear about what is good enough to take the next step. So, and it goes back to the heart of what I was saying about what Don Berwick was saying, which is that we have to be good enough to make a start and to take the next step, but we're wise enough to continually evaluate how it's doing and make those adjustments. And my experience is that those public service organisations who've dealt with austerity in that way have been the most successful. And I think that's pretty important in terms of having a proportional approach to the evaluation of assurance. I think my final point is to make change needs to happen at every levels. So if we're asking each organisation across the whole spectrum in Cumbria or Nottinghamshire to work together, we've got to have an alignment of the expectations across the regulators in terms of making sure that the messages that are being given are consistent right throughout the process, which isn't the same as just helping those local organisations. I think it presents...
Are they?
Well, I think all of us have got a process of change here. So my argument is that I think the question is an open one, and I would invite people to consider it.
You spend too much time with politicians.
I think make it less open, though. I think the ask is, if we are planning on a system basis as a large number of organisations to come up with something that works together, then we cannot be regulated individually. There's going to be ups and downs and fluctuations in both performance and finance between organisations as we move through this process, and hammering individual organisations to either improve their income or reduce their spend isn't going to work in conjunction with this.
So to be candid, no, I don't believe that's the case.
Okay. All right, thank you. Matthew, I know that you've already talked on stages here about the STP process. I won't ask you to recap everything you've done again, but perhaps you just give us a sense of where we are in the sort of STP journey now, and particularly what happens next. And I think very much uppermost in my mind, and Amanda has already mentioned it, is how the ST planning process, how we move through the approval process, how we move through the publication process, and particularly how the STP process is aligned with the 2-year planning process, which has got to produce agreed control totals by December, which, at least as far as I'm seeing, is saying that's the financial envelope in which you're going to operate in for the next 2 years, which seems to be pretty sort of deterministic on how much of what the STPs were going to do. So if you could perhaps reflect on that, and then I'm going to come to the audience for your questions.
Thanks, Alastair. I think I should start by saying that the STPs were created to make a reality of the 5-year forward view. That was a really hard question. I'm really grateful to the likes of Amanda and David and people around the country who have stepped up and led their STPs, because by definition, we were looking for the senior leaders in health systems to step up and give that leadership, and therefore, by definition, they were already really busy. So there isn't anybody doing these jobs who wasn't already working more than would be reasonably expected by their families. So everybody is feeling that pressure, and the alternative is to find someone that no one wanted to do jobs, because they've always got time on their hands, and ask them to do it, and then where would we have been? So the challenge that was set, and you've called it deterministic, I would say it was what was set out in the 5-year forward view, which is reduce health inequalities, improve quality and access, and do it within the financial envelope that has been set. Because, as was just said, we could have a debate about how much money would be right, but what we do know is how much money there is, and our obligation, and the STP's obligation, is to deliver the best possible health service for the amount of money that's available. So when we look at the scale of that challenge, it was pretty clear that this isn't going to be solved in the silos of local government, primary care, community services, mental health, acute trust. This is a systemic change to get the people who are in hospital and inappropriately out of hospital, which means releasing resources and creating resources in social care and community services, getting the people out of A&E departments who should be in primary care, which means getting resources into primary care. So you had to change the whole of the system simultaneously in order to create what we needed. We did a first set of reviews with the STPs in April, and the range of responses was from fantastic, at last we've got someone to talk to about the sort of planning we've been trying to do for the last 10 years, through to it's been really nice to meet the social services lead for the first time. So that was good for us to create those introductions. We gave some steers over what we were looking for, and I think we tried to join up at the national level by having the ALBs round the table, NHSI, NHS England, and so on, so that we weren't sending out different messages. We came back in, and I personally saw all 44 footprints in July, and they had moved to, we've pretty nearly got a plan, and we were testing those plans. Will they really improve health inequalities? Will they improve quality? Do we believe you can solve the money? Through to, we have a plan for a plan, we're moving forward, we know where we're going, but we haven't solved it yet.
So of those 44, how many are what proportion are in the ready-to-go camp? Maybe not completely finished, but almost there. Half?
I'd say you've got a normal distribution. You've got 10 at one end, which are pretty nearly there, need polishing. A big chunk in the middle who are making real progress, but got a lot still to do. And some at the far end whose challenges, particularly in systems that have not got a history of working well together, who've got a lot to do to get to the end.
And that's about the same number as the top, so there's about half a dozen, 10 of those. The ones
I'd say, yeah, if you were to draw the curve, it probably looks a bit like that. We did have some STPs that came forward in the first round, which we were thinking, this is extraordinary. It's like these people have never met. And when they came through the second round, it was some of the best plans. So people did make real progress between. Okay,
so progress. So give us a sense of the of when you're likely to approve, and how many are you? The plan is to approve all of them by the end of the year, the end of the calendar year.
So let's be clear, we're not planning on approving plans. These are local plans that we are assuring. So in the end,
assuring then. So
because I'm not in a position to tell Amanda whether the specific... Yeah, but it's really easy for you to turn this into, it's being rubber stamped by Simon and Matthew and Jim.
Perish the thought, Matthew. Yeah. Perish the thought. When are you going to assure them by?
Thank you. Just helping you get out of old thinking, Alastair.
Yes, thank you. I'm always grateful for that. When is the plan to have assured all 44 by?
So we're expecting the financial analysis, the templates, to come up in mid-September. We're expecting final plans to come through in mid-October, and we are looking at that point to get as many of them to say, we like what you're proposing to do there, get on and turn it into an action plan to implement, others to give some steer to, and others to say you're still going to need some help. But that's the point when it rolls into the contracting process. So we will be putting the planning guidance out at the same time, which I'm hoping will give a lot of the flexibility that's being talked about here, which says if you've got a plan that works, go and implement it together, and don't let old-style contracting stop you from doing the right thing. Create a control total for your system. In the end, a CCG will be responsible for something, a hospital will be responsible for something, social services have statutory obligations that they have to fulfill. But if, as that goes forward, the CCG manages to reduce activity in the A&E department faster than the plan, and the hospital says, that's going to hit our financial plan negatively, and the CCG is doing well out of that. I don't want the hospital to go find activity to balance their plan. I want the STP to agree, that's great. We will manage that as a balance across the system, and we as regulators, providing the whole system comes in where it's supposed to, we as regulators will give a pass on that.
Let me play that back to you, just so that I've got a sense of that I haven't slipped back into old-style thinking, and I've understood this properly. The idea is that the STPs that are the most fully developed, you're hoping to assure them by by the end of October, give or take. Those that aren't ready to be assured, yes, they effectively become part of the 2-year planning process that is going to be agreed in sort of November and December, and the decisions about what's going to change and what's not going to be changed is made over that period as part of that process?
No. What will happen is that we are looking to get all the contracts for the whole of the system signed off by the end of December.
Yeah.
What we should get a sense of in the middle of October is how many light touch, just get on and do it, how many are going to need more support and more guidance to get them to the right place, so that come December we get as many, preferably all, but as many plans turned into contracts and ready to go. It's ambitious to try and get them all there, frankly, but that's going to be the ambition. After that, there's going to you have a 2-year contract. You have 4 years worth of implementations to deliver a trajectory, during which time consultation will need to happen over some of the changes. Implementations will need to happen. There will then be long-term implementation.
So I understood. Thank you very much for explaining that better. Explain it so I can understand. So there may be some STPs that are still not assured by the end of the calendar year. You're only expecting a small number, but there may be a small number that aren't assured by the end of the calendar year.
We're not planning for that to happen, but then we didn't plan for any contracts not to be signed by the 31st of March this year either. The task will be to get them all done by the end of the year. If any fall over the edge, that is not what we're planning for.
Okay. What about publication? When should people publish their STPs? Is it up to local leaders?
It's really up to local leaders to manage their local communities and engage them. And I think, you've said it several times elegantly and amusingly, this is not a secret. Every STP has been consulting in different ways, has been different to different groups. In some places, we've had the chief executive of the council coming along to the STP. In other places, we've had the leader of the council, and the politicians have been right at the heart of it. It's different in different places because it is different in different places, which is why the STPs are local bottom-up, and not everybody will do it exactly like this.
But there's no NHS England stipulation that thou shall not publish until we say so, until we've told you can publish.
There's no NHS England stipulation of that, I don't think. What I would say is we would discourage people from publishing stuff they're still working on.
Yeah,
These are work in
you
progress.
can give a view, but there is no stipulation.
And I think I don't know, ask my colleagues where they stand on that.
So I think the advice was that not to publish them before June.
That would be a brave decision. Did somebody tell you it would be a brave decision?
No, the advice was not to publish before June the 30th. But I think the point I would make about this is that, as I indicated, I've given 6 presentations. It's a public forum. It's called the Health and Wellbeing Boards, and we've been on national radio. The fact is that I think it's reasonable to have conversations with those organisations in the preparation of the plan, which we have done. I don't think it's reasonable or sensible to publish plans where you're not sure of the veracity of them or whether they are properly worked through. That's not sensible. So you have to be in a position. So it's not an either or. It's an approach to communication, engagement, and co-production that reflects a sensible approach to this. And I think that would be something that any responsible person person
It's
would
worth
make.
saying what we've got so far is not a plan as in a complete narrative that describes everything we're going to do and what healthcare will look like in 5 years' time. It's a series of templates, some governance information, some finance templates. There'd be no point publishing them. I don't even understand the finance templates. I know what they mean, but publishing them would be almost meaningless. So the bits that we know and are agreed and everybody signed up to, like governance arrangements, like who's in your STP, as in what are our priority areas to work on, is public. It's been around health and wellbeing boards. It's been everywhere. Some of the early drafts around what does bed number modelling look like if we did something.
So with that in mind, Amanda, is it realistic that that you will have nailed all the numbers down, the financial numbers down, by the end of the calendar year, which is what, just over 4 months away? including Christmas.
The ask is really, really difficult, and we're not, making any bones about that. And the message back to Matthew and Simon and Jim is, this is really hard to do in the time we've got, but we've got a limited time to sort this out. Mm-hmm. We are not sustainable as we are. We haven't got the luxury of 2 years to nail down absolutely every detail of everything. We've got to get on and deliver. We've got to improve health. We've got to improve outcomes. And we've got to be able to afford what we're doing. Matthew, sorry, I rudely interrupted you when you were doing your introduction. Was there anything else particularly you wanted to make, either in general or in response to what Amanda and David had said about what happens next on STPs?
No, I think we've accurately described that. I would just echo Amanda's point, is that we don't have time to take longer. Not only do we have health inequalities to deal with, we have people lying in hospital beds today who should be being cared for in their own homes. And so every day we decide to have another committee meeting rather than getting on and making hard decisions, we are not delivering the optimum NHS and social care that we could for the money that's available.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, long overdue for I tend to questions. Right, here's the ground rules. Take questions in groups of 3. No speeches, please. Just nice, short, brief questions so that we can hear from our panellists. I have a delegate down the front here, please. Going to have 2, and then one at the back there. Just that lady there, please. Yeah, the microphone's just coming to you. Right, we'll take these 2 questions and then we'll find a third. Sir, please.
Hello, I'm Gordon Cairns. On Twitter, I'm Gordon Cairns 3. I'm a patient who's had to pay for myself to come here, and I can't afford to buy the HSJ, so that's got that out of the way. I have been to my local health and wellbeing board. I come from Chester in West Cheshire. Been to my local health and wellbeing board, asked questions about the STP. They gave me answers that I wasn't really satisfied with. But when it came to talking about the STP, it went into part 2 of the meeting, and I was ejected from the meeting because, as you know, part 2 is private. Now, that's all I've got to say, really.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yes. Why would the STP planning be put in part 2 of a H and Wellbeing Board?
Okay, thank you very much. Lady at the back, please.
My main concern is that we are talking about the National Health Service, and I don't see anything national in what is being described here. It sounds to me like a massive reorganisation and a fragmentation, and even within Greater Manchester, which is where I'm living, there are different plans in different areas. So I would like that to be addressed, really, as to whether we're actually through this losing the national from our NHS.
Okay, thank you very much. Good question. Yes, and lady in the middle there, please. Just the microphone's coming to you.
Thanks. I'm a GP in Sheffield, interest in service improvement. I'm just wondering how much primary care is involved in these plans. Do you think that it's a balanced involvement that they've got? Are they having a leadership and being supported for an equal voice?
Okay, thank you very much. David, why don't you do the how health and wellbeing boards should deal with STP plans and whether they should be discussed in the public or private? You touched a little bit on that itself. Amanda, do primary care, and Matthew, perhaps you might reflect on the national picture. Mm-hmm. David.
So in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, they haven't been in a private session of the Health and Wellbeing Board. They've been in the public session. And I'm absolutely committed to transparency as far as you possibly can. Having said that, there may be some circumstances where you've got the germ of an idea and you don't want that for that to be splashed all over the press before you've had a chance to work it through. So I think both of those positions are true. So there are some situations where you would say, we have this particular way of addressing a particular problem. We just want to sound it out with the politicians before we discuss it in a public forum. And I think that's also reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
Well, I'm a practicing GP, so I don't need convincing of the value of primary care input into an STP. All of this is only going to stack up, whatever we do. If we transform primary care, step up the amount of both health prevention and delivery of healthcare that we do out of hospital in primary care, and you can't do that without primary care involvement. Locally, we've got, in addition to me, we have appointed a whole team to devote to primary care transformation across the patch. We've appointed 2 GPs 2 days a week each to lead on that transformation. We've got the LMC and other GP involvement on our programme board. We see it as absolutely vital. And not just general practice. We need to think about how dental services fit into this, how pharmacy services can contribute to our aim of looking after people better, closer to their own homes. So, yes, is the answer.
So, Matthew, you've just, of course, returned from working in the States for a while. So you've had a good chance to view a system which is very much not national in the US system. And of course, you were very heavily involved in the reforms that took place in the noughties. How do you see and the constant tension in reforms, whether they be it in the States or in the UK, have been this tension between local choice and national consistency? And where you're a long-time student of these kind of things, how do you position these particular set of reforms?
Yes, I think there is always a challenge between what you mandate nationally and what you design locally to reflect the fact that Sheffield is different to Devon, is different to Hartlepool, is different to Blackpool, versus the fact it is a national health service. I would say that this is very much in the sweet spot of a national health service within the 5-year forward view, a national set of standards to be delivered, guaranteeing national access and quality across every part of the country to everybody. The piece that's local is, how do I do that in my area? How do I make that true in Blackpool versus how do I make that true in Tower Hamlets? And that's and what we've tried to do is to say, here is the framework which defines a national health service through the 5-year forward view, through the mandate, through the Constitution, and then how do we engage everybody locally in order to solve that problem. So I'm very comfortable that this is the opposite of fragmentation. This is ensuring that we have the finest minds locally in ensuring that we get the best possible local health and care service, delivering delivering within a national framework. And if I could just add to Amanda's point, there haven't been I've seen all 44 of the STPs. And sat down with them, and every single one of them has had CCG and GP representation within them and at the core of solving their problems, whether they are the lead for that CCG, or in the case of yours, the acute trust chief executive is the lead, or in the case of Norfolk, where the chief executive of the local authority is the lead. There is a complete spread.
Yeah, for good or ill, since I became editor of HSJ in 2002, I don't think I've seen a reform process with more emphasis on or involvement from primary care. I mean, this is the first big piece of reform that I think has happened since the NHS was created, which has configuring primary care as the sort of main point of it, you know, and actually reconfiguring secondary care as a secondary point of it, though no doubt that's what most of the newspapers will write about. Okay, question there. Where are my friends with the microphones? So yes, if you give the one to the lady in the red as you go past, and then one to the gentleman. No, just down there. Thank you very much. And we've got another question over there. Go, sir.
Hi, Brendan Hill. I'm Chief Executive of Concern Group. We're a third sector provider of NHS commission services. And it touches on this you were saying about regulation. And I understand that each patch will be different, but there's a strong narrative through all of them, which is collaborate, we've got to move around away from organisational thinking into system thinking, etc., etc. If that's the case, some of this looks so fundamental to me, as in, is there any work being done on what an FT is? Because it almost looks like the kind of structure and function of, why foundation trusts were put into place, and certainly how they're regulated, doesn't seem to fit this new model. So has there been any work done on, a post-FT world?
Jolly good. Somebody had said that somebody once suggested, actually, I think it was my colleague David Williams, who suggested the FT membership model actually applies much better to an accountable care type organisation that some of the STPs are developing than it actually does to a traditional hospital trust. So, but we'll see what other people, what our panelists have to think.
Yeah, my name's Nora and I'm a patient. My question's about the time that's been wasted, but it's about public involvement in this. The letter to you all the accountable officers in February this year, 2016, said that you've got to get it right, you've got to engage patients, staff and communities from the start, developing priorities through the eyes of those who use and pay for the NHS. Why did you not start this earlier? The 5-year forward view was published in October 2014. It's nearly 2 years ago. If you got your act together a little bit earlier and hadn't developed this new idea for STPs in December last year, the public could have been involved. You say they should be. Why aren't you doing it? And why didn't you get your act together earlier so you could have done?
Yep, okay. I think we'll have some answers to that. One more question, please. No, all right. I'm going to. So let's talk about governance, because in my colleague David Williams had a question about governance. He suggested that I might put you, and the question was, when in future years we're discussing how the next mid-staffs was able to happen, do you think the lack of formal oversight and accountability we're seeing in STPs will form part of the debate? So, Amanda, I know you said that you focused a lot on governance and accountability. Did you do that particularly because you were concerned that if you didn't do it at that early stage, it might become an afterthought?
We did it because we knew what the size of the task was. We really needed, A, to make sure we had all the right people involved and that it fit, and B, to make sure we were in a position to make difficult decisions jointly together, and that's what we've done. I mean, it's interesting about the question about what's an FT and how loads of this stuff doesn't fit. And actually, in many ways, this is a breath of fresh air, because everyone in the system is saying, forget all of that, let's just not worry about it. Let's do what we know is the right thing to do for our population pretty quickly, and let's worry about that separately. At some point, we're going to have to align the rules with what we're all actually doing.
Yes, it is, as I say, being editor of HSJ since 2002, it is astonishing how 90% of the Health and Social Care Act is being completely and utterly ignored, rightly so in most cases, to get on with this STP process. It's really quite astonishing. But the issue of alignment is important. Kieran Walsh has written about this in HSJ today, saying that we can't go on ignoring the legislation forever. But Matthew, what's your view about how seriously or not has governance been taken across the spread of the 44? Obviously, we have two shining examples here, but across the spread of all 44?
Governance has been taken very seriously across all 44. I'm absolutely comfortable with that, and we can tell by the number of people in the room and the number of organisations that are represented that's happened. But STPs are not statutory organisations. This does not undermine the responsibility of the local authority to deliver safe social care, the responsibility of primary care and the responsibility of the hospital to fulfil their statutory obligations. Wherever you draw the lines in the National Health Service, you will have drawn the lines in the wrong place. It is a complex social system, and if you pretend you can solve things in silos, you end up with problems. So this is a mechanism for statutory organisations to come together and solve stuff together and take their piece of the problem back and get on and solve it, working together to optimise the answers. And you can agonise over structures and legislation, and frankly, given the challenge that the NHS faces and the needs of the people of England, the dumbest thing we could do would be to spend 2 years passing a piece of legislation which allowed us to retitle our organisations, because people are still ill and still need to be treated. They should still be being cared for in the right place. And so I think, I mean, one of the things I've been impressed by is the extent to which in my speech yesterday, I referenced Bob Geldof when they made the Live Aid song and saying the artists needed to check their egos in at the door as they came into the studios. And a lot of what we've seen in STPs is organisational leaders checking their egos in at the door and coming in and talking about the needs of their populations. And I think that's fantastic.
Okay. Dave, did you
Yeah,
want to
I did. Just to say something about the governance. Going back to the National Health Service, we must remember that a lot of this is about social care and other local services. And if we're to successfully meet the needs of our populations in the 21st century, it is about all of those services being receptive to those changing needs. And therefore, when we talk about the integration of health and social care, you've got to have a governance arrangement that reflects the NHS and its various constituent forms as a result of the Health and Social Care Act as nationally led, compared with local government, which is locally led with local democratic legitimacy. And having been a senior officer in local government for a very long time, there is a very powerful tool of assurance in this is local elected members who are close to their local communities, know about the experience of their population, and are pretty quick to feed it back to people like me. So I think we're missing a trick if we think that it's all about assurance at a national level. On the FT governance, I completely agree with my colleagues that the worst thing we can do is focus on organisational form. So national policy around changes have often particularly around integration, have focused on structures and pooling budgets. That's been the death knell of integration for the best part of 30 years. What we should be talking about is what are the levers to transforming care that best meet the needs of our population. And then we'll worry about the barriers of organisations when they become a problem.
Okay, I think David and Amanda have both reflected on the fact that they have attempted to engage with patients and the public through the... So just, Matthew, give us your honest view about how well across the 44 STPs they've done patient engagement, whether they've started early enough, whether they've done enough, how much more they've got to do. It's a mixed picture, I imagine. It's a mixed picture, but then I am not as well positioned to judge the right way to consult a local community as the accountable officer of the CCG and the chief executive and director of adult social care from that place. They need to manage their local politicians, make sure they have the right amount of information, manage their local communities. Some of them are looking at more than one option to solve the problem and are choosing to have that complex debate. But when you're seeking to assure the STPs, I'm assuming that one of the measures of assurance is whether or not you are satisfied that they have provided you with the evidence that they have done enough patient engagement, patient and public engagement. Yeah, we discussed both that and going forward, how will you be consulting for each change in detail and what will this feel like to local people? Right, I'm going to sneak one final question of my own in right at the end, which I call the Chorley A&E question. So Chorley A&E, which as we know got closed because there was a shortage of medics. I've always thought if surely A&E reopens, then that will be a sign that the hard decisions around reconfiguring services will not be made. So Matthew, the message that came from the centre very clearly 3 or 4 months ago was get on and make the hard decisions that you need to make around reconfiguring services to free up the ability to introduce new care services. So not cuts, just sometimes you need to disinvest from some areas so you can invest in other areas. That's entirely appropriate. Given what's happening, tightening money, the publicity around STPs, making the whole issue sensitive, is that still the advice, still to get on and to make the hard decisions as quickly as possible?
Yeah, that is still the advice, because the alternative is that things fall over through an absence of leadership taking accountability. So the ability to put together a clinical rota is one of the very many variables that has to be played in the plan. So is how many home nurses do I need in order to be able to care for people who are currently in hospital who could be better in their own beds if we had the right support in place. And we should not fetishize about a hospital problem when we should be thinking about a system problem.
Wise words for us to finish on. Thank you very much to our panel. Shall we thank them all, please? Thanks very much. Really appreciate everybody coming and staying to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I hope you've enjoyed NHS Expo 2016. See you all next year. Safe journey home.